and welcome to Decoding Your Canine. Discover the secrets of having the perfect dog, the masterclass series covering health, well-being, training, and behavior. And today I have with me Kristin Rosenbach from Wagnificent Canine Truffle Dogs. And I am really, really excited, Kristin. Welcome, because we are going to be talking about truffle hunting around the world. But firstly, introduce yourself. How did you get into truffle hunting? And, tell us about your journey into dog training.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much for having me for this summit. I appreciate it. My name is Kristin Rosenbach. I am a truffle hunter and a truffle dog trainer, and I live in the Pacific Northwest, but I teach all over the world. I got into truffle hunting to begin with because of a vacation to Italy where I was introduced to truffles. Wow. And then I found out that they were found by dogs. And I joked a lot that I was going to teach my dogs to find truffles. And then one day in a random internet search, I was looking for where to buy truffles, and I discovered that they grew in my area. And I thought, I have an idea. And so that's sort of how it all began. It was a time frame when we had just brought home Da Vinci as a puppy. He's my Belgian Travern. And about the same time, Callie, my first border collie, had an agility-related injury, and she was going to be on a significant period of restricted activity. So I thought, well, let's do some scent work type activities. And then this truffle hunting piece came into play, and truffle hunting was actually part of her rehabilitation.
Wow, I got so many questions. Firstly, I thought pigs hunted truffles in places like Italy or France or whatever.
In the past, they did. I think there are still some people out there that use pigs, but most people use dogs now.
Right. Wow. And so you'd never sort of done, I imagine you've done scent work before with the dogs and you just transferred it over to truffles, no?
I know.
So you taught them yourself from scratch, kind of not knowing anything?
I did.
Wow.
I sort of pieced together information from a friend of mine who was in scent detection she did everything from search and rescue to explosives detection, that kind of stuff. And then I contacted someone in the truffle industry who could tell me all the things about truffles. Wow. And I would just get information from both of them and I put the two together.
Right. So, but before we talk about the topic, let's talk about truffles in general. So, I mean, they're pretty expensive, aren't they? And I mean, I've never eaten a truffle. I've eaten maybe truffle butter or something like that. But what's the attraction to them?
Well, they're very unique. And all the different species that are out there, they all bring something different to the plate. They're all very, very different. So, for example, when you're talking about, say, a European black truffle, they tend to have more of a earthy, musky type, we'll say flavor, but you're not actually tasting the truffle. It has more to do with the aroma. But for simplicity, we'll say flavor. Then if you go into, say, our black truffles here in the Pacific Northwest, they are more of a chocolatey, fruity type flavor. Oh, wow. And then you get into the white truffles, they tend to be more of this pungent, garlicky, it's always a weird way to explain it this way, but it's the most accurate. It's almost like a gasoline punch.
That actually doesn't sound very tasty at all.
It's amazing. It's just kind of like that. It's that aroma or that experience of that sort of dramatic, garlicky punch when you're consuming the dish that has the truffles in it.
So you just mentioned 3 different varieties. I imagine there's more than 3, though, is there? Oh, sorry, excuse me. That will, how do I stop this? There's me turning everything off and my phone's decided to alert me anyway that, yeah. Go
on. So you were asking about the different types of truffles or how many?
So you mentioned 3, but I imagine there's more than 3.
Yeah, there are actually hundreds of truffles around the world. The question is whether or not you have the culinary varieties in your area.
Uh-huh.
But among the culinary varieties, there are several over in Europe. You've got three primary species of black truffles over there, and then the white truffle, the Italian white truffle, which is literally the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
The best one and the most expensive. And then some of those varieties are cultivated down in Australia and yep, in different areas of Europe and also here in North America. And then as far as native truffles, say here in North America, we've got over on the West Coast, we've got an Oregon black truffle and the Oregon white truffle. There's a couple others that are lesser known. And then when you move more towards the south, southeast and up the eastern border, you've got an Appalachian truffle, you've got pecan truffles, and a couple others that are sort of just now coming out into awareness. So it's pretty exciting.
You mentioned culinary truffles, which obviously would be the ones you eat. If they're not culinary, what are they and what do you do with them?
Well, we typically don't find the ones that aren't culinary because we didn't train on those.
Right. Gotcha.
But if we do find them, we just leave them out there. There's plenty of critters out there that'll eat them.
Right.
Yep. And all of those truffles are beneficial in the ecosystem because they have these relationships with the trees that are exchanging nutrients. And so they have functions. They just don't tend to be ones that we want to eat.
Yeah. So I have always, when I've ever thought of truffles, thought about pigs, which obviously isn't the case these days, but I've also always thought about Europe. I've certainly never thought about America, and I've definitely never ever thought that in Australia here that I might actually be able to go truffle hunting. So how would I find truffles in my area, depending on where I am living, and how would I go about that?
Okay, well, specifically in Australia, you actually have several different kinds of wild truffles. To my knowledge, none of the wild ones are ones that you're going to want to eat. That said, there are many. I
thought, right, before you go on, I was thinking, right, I get my dog, I teach them to find them, then I'll go out in the bush and I'll be like really rich because truffles are really expensive.
If you find one that's good to eat, yes, you'll be the first one to do it there. And so they are out there in your region. In fact, I had recently read an article where people were saying that they were so pungent that even the people could go out and they could smell.
Oh, wow.
They're ripening. But primarily for you have truffle farms. So Australia is actually one of the biggest producer of European truffles.
All right.
Exported to the world.
So what? I go and knock on the farmer's door and say, hey, I want to get my dog into your paddock to find your truffles, or?
You might. A lot of them do have their own dogs, but I'm sure there are plenty that hire them out.
Right. So they don't it's not like when you say a farm, I imagine they have rows and they put the truffles in there to grow and they know exactly where they are, then they cultivate them, blah, blah, blah. No.
No, when people talk about truffle farms, it is an orchard, depending on the species of truffles that they want to grow. Depends on what type of tree they have in the orchard. Those trees are inoculated with the spores, basically, and then they go in the ground, and then you have to wait many, 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 many years for the mycelial network to form underground, because that network is responsible for the fruiting body, which is the truffle.
Wow, so many years. So,
yes.
If somebody was wherever they are in the world, and that could be South Africa, it could be Europe, could be America, how do they find out if there's truffles in their area and that they can actually go and find them with their dog once the dog's trained?
Yeah. So it all pretty much same thing as it did with me. It starts with some internet research.
Right.
So oftentimes you can literally just type in, are there wild truffles in and type in your location. The part that gets a little tricky is that it's pretty common knowledge that there are truffles in the Pacific Northwest. It's common knowledge that there are truffles in Europe. So you do find a lot of information about that. It's not as common knowledge that there are pecan truffles in the southern United States and all the way over into Florida. So someone who types in, are there truffles in Michigan? Probably are only going to come up with a little bit of information. So you do have to keep digging because and this is kind of the cool part about it. It's hard to find the information, but it's hard to find the information because there aren't enough teams out there searching, which means that anybody who decides they want to get into this type of activity can be on the front lines of an industry in their area.
Wow.
So, for example, I mean, the Pacific Northwest is fairly well established, but we are very, very new to the industry compared to, say, Europe and Australia, right? So when I started, there were probably only 5 of us hunting in the Pacific Northwest professionally, right? So in my situation, I was actually on the front end of the industry here, and that was only 13 years ago. What I see happening now in these other areas, so the other parts of the United States, where it's lesser known that there are truffles throughout the Appalachian Mountains, that kind of stuff, people who want to get into that are going to find that there isn't a lot of information now, but they will pretty much be in the same situation that I was in 13 years ago. And then that truffle boom is going to start to happen. That is my sort of prediction.
And so can anybody go into, where do you go, like national forest or national parks or what? Obviously you can't just go trooping along into someone's private land with your dog.
Right. Different areas are going to have different regulations.
Right.
So for example, I personally prefer to hunt on private property. So I will usually just reach out directly to a property owner, tell them their property looks likely to have truffles based on the habitat, and can we come out and take a look? And if they do have truffles, then I make some sort of arrangement with them to be able to hunt on their property. There are, say, national forests where you can go truffle hunting. There would be, the National Forest Service would have their own regulations as far as foraging goes. For example, national parks here don't allow that.
Yeah.
But then if you're up in Canada or, you're over in the UK or somewhere else, there's going to be different regulations based on all of those places. So you will find the ability to hunt on public land. And then you also have the ability to reach out to these private landowners and ask if you can truffle hunt on their property. So would you trespassing, you have a lot of options.
Yeah. So would you say there's a good chance that truffles grow where you live?
I would say so. I think there are a lot of culinary truffles that grow in a lot of areas we haven't explored.
Yeah,
and
that's exciting.
It is. I do say that mostly in reference to North America, just because we've been so focused on the Pacific Northwest. There aren't a lot of teams out there in the other areas looking. And if they're not looking, then the reports don't come in. And then when you go to look on the internet, you don't see that there's anything out there.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting, actually. I'm waiting for some of my students to find their first Appalachian truffles because I really want to taste it and I'm going to buy one.
Talking about buying, so you find a truffle stash, for want of a better word, or one of your dogs does. What do you do with them? Do you sell them to restaurants? Do you, like obviously there's some money to be made. How does all that work?
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of different ways that someone can start to make money in the truffle hunting industry. Me personally, everything that I find goes to my students because we train with real truffles.
Right.
So I typically don't have a surplus to sell to chefs and restaurants, but I have I know. I have a short list of people that I contact if I do have a surplus.
Right.
But other things that you can do if you start truffle hunting with your dog is, as we talked about, you might get hired to harvest for
Somebody, nice.
For some of those orchards.
Mm.
Might be in your area. You can lead guided tours. People love that. You can sell the truffles. You can sell those truffles to restaurants, to chefs, to individuals. You can sell them to makers, people who make truffle products. So you have a whole bunch of different avenues that you can use those for, or you might use them for teaching like I do.
And you forgot one.
What's that?
You forgot one.
What did I forget?
Eat them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of them are in my belly.
Yeah, I was going to say you must have like a ton of really cool recipes that include truffles.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun cooking with truffles. So my personal favorite is adding them to comfort foods. So I love things like a black truffle burger or truffle mac and cheese or a truffle grilled cheese or things like that.
Yeah. So such an interesting conversation. But so what about the dog? So obviously the dog's getting something out of it too. Like you get a heap of stuff out of it in terms of, what you can do with the truffles. But what on the dog side of things, what does the dog get out of it?
Well, first of all, any form of scent detection is it's so good for the dogs, which many people watching this, everybody knows. So you're tapping into a natural ability with the dogs. But in addition to that, why I'm even more in love with truffle hunting than other forms of scent detection is we're out in nature. And that in itself has its own health benefits for the dog and me. It's just us. Right? Unless I choose to take somebody else with us. So I'm not having to manage group dynamics and things like that, where there's other dogs and other people present. So, which comes in really handy with dogs that maybe aren't comfortable around other dogs or sensitive dogs. So that's one of the things I really enjoy about it. The other thing is there are no rules. So there's no judge, nobody's timing you. There's no rule book. You're making up the dialogue, the conversation, the process that works for you and your dog specifically. So there's, other than the training process, that you do want to, be methodical about. But when you're out there communicating with your dog and you're going through all of these sequences of searching for the truffle, harvesting the truffle, there's a dialogue that's happening between you, and you start to learn each other's language. And because there isn't any outside influence of rules and judges and timers and things that you would otherwise see in competition sports, you sort of get to let it evolve naturally. And somehow that then culminates into this incredible relationship between the dog and the handler that starts to become something that becomes much deeper than anything that they had before. I always say a lot of people come to me to learn to truffle hunt and they leave with a better relationship with their dog.
Oh, that's beautiful. And what about, can any dog do it?
Yes.
Or is it specific to certain breeds and age?
It is not breed specific. It is not age specific. So I hunt with 4 herding breeds. I have 2 border collies, a Belgian Tervern and a Sheltie. The first border collie and the Sheltie and the Belgian Tervern were the first of their breeds to truffle hunt in this area. I have worked with everything from staffies to flatcoat retrievers, coonhounds, even an Anatolian mix. A Papillon.
Papillon, oh my goodness. That's cool.
Any breed, literally any breed can do it. I'm partial to the herding breeds, obviously, but they've all excelled.
Right. So. What do they do when they actually find the truffle? How do they indicate that there's something there?
So it varies a little bit between teams, but for the most part, typically there will be an initial indication that they have found where the truffle odor is coming out of the surface. So you've got the ground here, you've got the truffle down here somewhere. At somewhere up here, the dog is going to find the highest concentration of odor. And at that point, that's when the dog is initiating the harvesting sequence. So sometimes that might be the dog immediately starts to dig. Sometimes that means the dog sticks their nose in one spot and they take a long inhale, which is the case of one of my dogs. Sometimes they get to it and they know they're there and they look to the handler, which basically is an invitation. Hey, there's a truffle here. Let's dig it up. So you'll see a combination of those different things. The dogs usually pick the one that they're most comfortable with, and that's the one we go with. We let them offer it. But that initial indication of where that odor is coming out of the ground, that's just the beginning of the harvesting sequence. And then at that point, it becomes the dog inviting you, the handler, to come start harvesting. Then there's this back and forth activity in the hole. The dog does something, I move some dirt. The dog does something, I move some dirt.
That's cool.
You go back and forth. The dog is continually reassessing the hole, because as you dig down, that highest concentration of odor might be over here. So you might start your dig here, but the truffle is over here.
Oh, right.
The odor was coming out through the path of least resistance.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
dig down, the dog is directing you which way to dig. And then the very final behavior is the dog nose targeting the truffle.
Right. And they don't try to eat them then?
Dogs do not, contrary to what people will say, dogs tend not to eat truffles unless they learned to somewhere along the way in the training process.
Right.
Most anybody who comes to me and says, my dog eats truffles,
Yeah.
I can go through their training process and I can identify where the error occurred, where the dog learned to put odor in their mouth.
It's interesting. Like historically, when they used to use pigs, how on earth did they watch a pig? I mean, I imagine the pig would have been digging it up at some point and they've gone, oh, well, maybe we'll try to eat this. Like, do you have any knowledge on the history of all that at all?
The pigs would have eaten it.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the pigs are actually foraging for it.
Right. Yeah.
They actually want to eat it. So that's the other reason a lot of people will hunt with dogs now, because dogs, it's hard to manage a pig that wants to eat the truffle.
Yeah. Get out of the way. No, don't do that, piggy.
Right.
That's it. It's mine.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, pigs are really smart, but
Yeah. Have you got any top tips on truffle hunting?
yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, the most important thing, I think, is to train your dog using real truffles.
Mm-hmm.
There is a tendency, partly because this is the way it's done with competition nose work, there's a tendency for people to want to get a truffle oil, put it on a cotton swab, put it in a container. The problem with that, and there's a lot of fallout with doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I understand where it comes from. I understand the rationale behind it.
Yeah.
But what I've found is the training process is much more efficient. It's more effective, and it's more honest to the dog if you work with a real truffle, because oil on a cotton swab in a container does not look, feel, or smell like a truffle.
No.
And the dog needs to know what the texture of the truffle is. They need to know what the actual odor of a truffle is, which is much more variable than what you would get in an oil. Not to mention the carrier oil has odor, the cotton swab has odor, the container has odor, and you're never going to find that in the forest. So,
yeah.
top tip, use real truffles. And that's probably like the number one highest priority. Number two, do all of your training outside. I run into a lot of people who are doing their training inside, and I often just say, truffles don't grow inside. So, I mean, it's just specificity of training. It makes no sense to search for truffle odor inside when they don't grow there. So do all the training outside. The dog learns the to navigate the environment, how to navigate the weather. They start to understand the scent dynamics outside, which is very different than the artificial air movement that happens inside. And then lastly, getting those truffles below ground as fast as possible.
Right.
So that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be buried, but when you introduce the truffles and when you start doing your training processes, the truffle needs to be below ground because that's where they're going to grow. And so that way, even if it's an open hole to begin with, which it likely would be, if the truffle is actually placed below ground, it's more realistic for the dog. So most of the time, dogs are not going to find truffles on the surface. So it doesn't make any sense for us to be training with odor on the surface.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's brilliant. Right.
I'm very, very adamant about making things as realistic as possible and taking the most direct path.
Yeah.
To the final result of truffle hunting and being as honest as possible to the dog.
I imagine, sorry, you go. No, I was just going to say, I imagine when you go out and you don't find truffles, that would be disappointing for both you and the dog, or is it still just a fun outing?
It's still fun. The dogs develop such a desire and such a love of the activity that the hunting itself is so rewarding.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then if you as a handler are doing your job correctly, the dog is never going to get frustrated. If you have to, you're going to plant a truffle so that they have a win. You're going to have a process for the dog to come to you and in some way, shape, or form inform you, hey, there are no truffles here. Can we go somewhere else? And the dog will get rewarded for that. So what ends up happening is that the activity itself is very rewarding to the dog, whether or not we end up finding a truffle and their rewards happen there and we've gone through that full sequence, or they've completely cleared an area and they come back and say, hey, there aren't any truffles here. Great. Let's have a reward, have a party, and move on to another area.
So you've got a few dogs that do it. So I don't suppose you just take them all to the forest and let them all go. Off you go. Come and find me the truffles. Show me the money.
No, I only hunt with one dog at a time.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that's basically just so my attention isn't split because they're giving me their undivided attention. So I'm going to give them my undivided attention.
Yeah, that's cool. So you teach truffle hunting, and people can jump on your website, and the link will be below this video. But you also teach through the Fancy Dog Sport Academy. Is that correct?
I do. Yeah, I teach occasional webinars through Fancy Dog Sports Academy, and then through my own website, my own business. I have an online course. A couple different online programs for anybody across the world. And then, of course, anybody who lives local to me can train with me in person.
Yeah. And of course, your Facebook group, What the Dog Knows, as well, which I am a member of. And you have an amazing free gift. So there's a dog pushing my arm up and down, which is your online course. So Truffle Hunting with Dogs. So maybe talk us through that. The link's below this video.
Yeah. Are you talking about the freebie?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
For our audience, yeah.
Yeah, the free offer I have for everybody here is one lesson from my online course that goes through what truffles are, how dogs find them, the training process, and kind of shows you what the roadmap looks like. So you can sign up for that down, like Ness said, down in the link below.
Link below. Kristin, it has been amazing talking to you. I've learned so much about truffles, stuff I never knew. So yeah, really, really fascinating. Oh, I've got a dog climbing on my lap. Hang on, wait there. Just a big. Make an appearance. Here we go. All right, yeah. Thank you so much. It's been really cool talking to you.
Thank you.
See ya.